As a visual designer coming in, I think having opinions about and being able to differentiate what's good, what's quality, and what makes it mediocre is just so important. Approach things very tactically. And by that, I mean get the details as finite as possible earlier on.
What's your kind of favorite quote or mantra you like to live by?
Just get it done. It's very simple.
Welcome to a new episode of Tech to Table Talks. Today we're joined by Shirley Wu, a product design leader with a diverse career spanning high growth startups and big tech companies across B2B, B2C, Web3, consumer social, and even pet tech, amongst many others. Shirley is currently a staff product designer at Twingate, working on cybersecurity tooling. She has incredible experience building our startups backed by top-tier VCs like Sequoia and A16Z, driving 0 to 1 product design and brand strategy. This includes Threads, who recently exited to Shopify. Shirley was the first hire and first designer, designing the product and brand and growing the team from scratch. At Meta, she worked on cutting-edge AI technologies for speech and video understanding. Shirley's career reflects a remarkable blend of technical expertise and creative vision. I'm excited for everyone to learn from her today. So let's get started and dive into her journey. Hi Shirley, welcome to Tech to Table Talks. We're super excited to have you on the podcast today. You've been an amazing friend and big supporter of Tech to Table for over a year now, and I'm very excited to dive deeper in your amazing experiences. I think you have such a unique journey as a founder, as a product designer, and so much more than that. So yeah, excited to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, David.
Amazing. Where are you calling from today?
Brooklyn, New York, on a very gloomy day.
Amazing. Have you lived in... I know you've lived in New York, San Francisco, right? They're the two cities?
They're the two main cities. I lived right outside Montreal at a certain point, and I lived in Hong Kong too.
Wow.
My childhood.
Excited to dive deeper in kind of your experiences living in these different cities and, I mean, your experience as a product designer. But before we dive in, could you maybe share in 30 seconds or a minute a bit about Shirley Wu and a bit about your background?
Yeah, so I started designing back in 2009, went to school for traditional graphic design. Pivoted towards product when I started working at a gaming startup. Well, no, a dating startup first, and did the traditional, I would say non-traditional hacker house thing. And that was living in a trailer with 8 engineers building a thing. Going from there to, I guess, having worked at Oracle and then more startups and then Meta, which was known as Facebook back then, and then going back into another startup and after startup after startup, and always doing consulting and freelancing on the side. So it's been, I'd say, non-traditional journey, but I've loved every moment out of it. It's been really rewarding in many different ways.
Very cool. Wow, there's so many areas and things to unpack. I don't even know where to start, but I think for me, when I think about Shirley, I think about someone that's just loves building, loves like multiple side projects, loves being hands-on, loves creating things, whether that is digitally, physically. It runs in the whole spectrum of things, and I really do admire that in you. And I think like a question to that, I know LinkedIn, you have a description in your LinkedIn is like never not building something. And the description is also, it's important to me the work I do helps better educate and inform people.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? Like where does that kind of come from and where does this builder mentality come from? I think it's very inspirational.
Gosh, I actually haven't changed that in so many years at this point. So I forgot the latter piece of it, but
yeah. At least it still makes sense, right, today?
it really does. But
Yeah.
I think the builder mentality really came from having I'd say my first design role as a visual designer coming in and just learning more of like, back then, product design wasn't called product design, it was web design.
Wow.
And yeah, and product design was solely for like the 3D people, the actual industrial design people. And so back then, having had that hacker house experience really provided a different lens of what working together could look like. And it was really fun building together, being able to just tap someone on the shoulder and ask them like, hey, is this pushed out yet? Or even asking like, what are your thoughts on XYZ? And just having that was really nice versus like at my time in another large corporate company, I worked in a cubicle and it was not advised for us to tap other people on the shoulder and ask them for feedback or thoughts if they were not in your vertical. And a big part of that was probably just the bias they might have or the lack of information they might not know. It didn't really foster a collaborative workflow or environment, and it didn't feel creative at all. And so I just fell in love working with startups because of that. But
That
yeah,
very
never
cool.
not building things.
What a quote! I hope you've trademarked that. I think you should. I think you should. It's a great one-liner. I think for me, I always say with a business or startup, it's basically a collection of people. It's a collection of people working towards a common goal, creating something that didn't exist previously. And I think that is beautiful and incredible in itself. And that's personally why I love building. And I know you have multiple projects going on. Besides product design, you get into a lot of artistic stuff as well. Can you maybe share a little bit more about some of the projects you've kind of got your hands into over the years outside of product design?
Yeah, so I always love that balance of having a product as a full-time role and then contributing to other areas of creative outside of that. And so that could look like brand marketing, identity, and it helps me think in a very different way, which is lovely. I love that. Because I think brand is a little different when you work on it. Product is more tactical, I'd say. Versus brand, you really work more on like impressions, qualitative data, and things don't necessarily break in the same way. There's panic and chaos, but they don't pan out in the very same they don't pan out in very similar ways. And then outside of that, I also paint, I do ceramics. It's a big part of me because
Amazing.
firstly, I love working with color, and I think that's a big thing. And it helps me stay in touch with myself emotionally, which is very important. And yeah, like
It's really cool.
really never not making things, building things, working on things.
Very cool. I have to ask you, and I've seen some of your amazing branding work, and you have such a great, amazing like touch and feeling towards just an amazing brand. What are some of your favorite brands that you just top of your mind that you're like, wow, I love that branding, I love that design. It really speaks a lot of volume. Any favorite brands you may have?
I'm going to do the basic thing and say I think Loewe is great.
I actually don't know that company.
Yeah, good, good. I think I've been more interested in how people approach things conceptually rather than their actual execution on print. I'm more interested in how they see things and how it can be applied across the entire gamut of experiences from space, like spatial design, to actual web design, to how they're actually marketing things on social media. To me, that's really interesting and how these brand marketers are tying the entire campaign as a whole. Loewe is one of them. I'd say Gentle Monster, another one. It's a little basic. I'd say it's a little basic in the sense that everyone's probably going to have this as a similar response, but they really
Mm.
do a good job.
Can you maybe elaborate more on what these two companies do? I'm not sure what they do
Yeah,
myself.
so Loewe is a fashion brand, and Gentle Monster primarily focus on sunglasses, but they have like an offshoot
Wow.
brand, and I forget what the other one is. Its entire theme is like croissants and baked goods, and it's in Korea.
Oh,
It's super fun, and if folks haven't heard of it, highly recommend for people to check it out. But right now they have Gentle Monster has a collaboration with, I believe, Tekken.
Tekken
And
back in the day.
yeah,
Wow, I
Tekken
played
back in the
that.
days. So they did a concept where the sunglasses, I think, is one of the fighters. Like the,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. Fun
Wow,
stuff.
so cool. I'll definitely link that in this episode and podcast. A question I've always been thinking about and love to hear your thoughts on. There's some tech companies and even non-tech companies, they go with a very fun, modern, kind of cute, playful brand, and then you have on the other side of the spectrum, very serious, very kind of straight type of brand. How do you kind of think through this? Like I've seen some dev tooling companies and startups with like cartoons on the page, for example, and
Yeah.
then yeah, there's a whole spectrum of it. How do you work through that? I've always found that a little bit interesting.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things that go into it, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, but when it comes to the core team, their mission, their values, what they're trying to put out there, we'll usually do something similar to an audit or even a questionnaire and just really dive deep into folks internally first see their brand and how they want to present it out there. And then we'll do some magic there and dive deeper and explore various different types of concepts that might align to where the initial team might agree on. When it comes to creating mascots or illustrations and tethering that to the brand itself, I think it just really depends. If you want to make your company stand out or if you want to make it seem more professional and enterprise ready, just really totally depends because
Mm.
some folks may not know of your company, and that's where having a very different or loud, fascinating execution might lend to that memory of it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Brand identity, it's such a fun topic. Maybe continuing on that, I've been thinking a lot about how some companies has a mascot. You know, Duolingo has Duo, and then Gusto we have Penny the Pig, and that's been an interesting trend been seeing. And then you obviously have some successful companies like Stripe, which doesn't have a mascot at all. What's your
Mhm.
thoughts on having a mascot? Or, any thoughts on that?
Love mascots. Why not? I
Hmm.
think
Me
at
too.
least like yeah, why not, right? And I think if it comes down to it, like having a mascot internally would be really fun, especially because if your internal voice is a little bit different from the external voice, one day that might just like assimilate, but it does motivate or add and boost morale internally sometimes when you have your own mascot. So
Yeah,
I
I couldn't
love
agree
them.
more.
Huge supporter of mascots. If you can create one, I am not the best illustrator in that
Yeah,
aspect, but
yeah. So cute. Amazing. Okay, well, I think we can talk for 2 hours on this topic alone on branding, and you're an expert on this space. But we should take a pivot. I want to dive deeper on one of the things you mentioned earlier about living in two hacker houses. Very unique. I personally have not lived in a hacker house, but participate in a few hackathons, and I kind of love that mentality of 48 hours getting together with randoms and hacking away and creating something 0 to 1 and sharing it with the world. I think there's something special in that. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience in these hacker houses?
well, okay.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? The first hacker house I lived in was actually a trailer
Wow.
with 8 men
Wow.
building a dating startup,
Yeah.
dating, I guess, a gamified dating product.
Yeah.
And I would say all sorts of feelings
Hmm.
there, especially when it's in a trailer. And I think there was amazing moments of it. For example, being able to, I guess, get off work and acknowledge like we're all exhausted. Let's play a game and really kind of just get to know your coworkers better or your colleagues better and learn about what they care about, their values, what makes them tick. I think you're able to do that a little bit easier, especially if you're living with them versus if you see them in a 9 to 5 job, which I don't think that people are really doing anyways. Like 9 to 5 jobs are, like, it really depends on the projects they work on. And so my experience there was quite interesting because it was not the healthiest in the sense that you wake up in the morning, you roll out of bed, and you're working right away. And there are no boundaries when it comes to finishing work in that sense. I think my hours back then, back in 2000, I want to say 2010, 2011, that was when I started working on there, was maybe 8:30 a.m. up until 2, 3 a.m. at midnight, or like I guess past midnight.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but
You
it
sure
was
this
definitely an
this wasn't
experience.
investment banking or something?
I mean, I think that's the nature of something like a hacker house, though. The expectation is that because you are sprinting every single day, your body is just adjusting to those hours, and you try to make the most of it. It is definitely an experience, though, and I don't regret it. I will say it does take a huge toll on your health, and now I cannot do those 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. nights anymore. It does not sustain for me. But I did learn a lot.
But you can do like 9 to 9 now and still do 5 projects, which is also interesting, right?
Funny enough, my hours are, I wake up at 5:30,
Hmm.
or I try to.
Yeah.
And I go from 6 to maybe 4:30 to 5, and then I come back to it. I'll have like an hour or two of a break and I'll come back to it, and it's usually the side projects after that. And it's balance, right? We all need balance.
Nice. I love this topic. I love any like topics around productivity hacks, and I think like there's this element of like working hard or working smart, and I feel like you've nailed working smart quite well as you progressed, in your career. What are some tips and tricks for people to just learn on like, you previously worked 30 to 3 a.m. with like maybe 1 or 2 projects. Now you're, maybe half the time and you're doing more projects. Like, how do you like maybe prioritize or advice on people to just work more intelligently?
I would say approach things very tactically.
Mm.
And by that, I mean get the details as finite as possible earlier on. And that way, you're able to navigate how much time you might actually need to dedicate to this one workflow or this one feature that's going to go out. Because if it's ambiguous and loosey-goosey, I think what tends to happen is those conversations tend to run in circles and they don't really lead to a productive conversation. So get as finite as possible as early as you can and communicate that broadly so we're all on the same page when it comes to like productivity hacks. Another one is calendar. I am huge when it comes to scheduling time on calendar, blocking off time so that I can track exactly where my day and where my hours are going. And so if it's like my full-time job, I'm gonna have that in dark blue. If it's my side projects, it's gonna be a gray. And if it's I have like a moment of brain rest, and that's usually in pink. And so I color code everything on my calendar.
Very cool. Very cool. I tried that. It's color coded, but I've kind of lost like I don't know what green means, yellow means, or red means by this stage. But I need to be more disciplined on that. That's really cool. I can imagine as a designer, your calendar looks so amazing. Like there's probably emojis and everything like that on it, right?
There are, but I'd say it also looks very messy from the outside in. Like my social time usually is in yellow or orange, and so it's kind of like spread out everywhere.
Love it. Love it. I know just before this call, we were talking about you were doing your to-do list as well, which is another fun topic. How do you like to stay organized with your to-do list? Any things you want to elaborate on that?
I have a checklist and they are categorized right now. I won't say this is the perfect way of doing so. And I've thought about even using linear to put just my my daily to-do list combined with like my work tasks in there. But I think the moment I put it into linear, it just might feel a little bit too work oriented and take the fun out of the side projects. And so I'm trying to balance that a little bit, but they are pretty much categorized by topics. So if it's for Twingate, the company I work on right now, what the to-do list looks like there is very different, and because there's subtasks in there,
Yeah.
versus if it's like my grocery list, then it's
Yeah.
just like one standard checklist.
Yeah. Interesting. Such a fun topic on optimizing time and taking control of your time, which is not being dictated by your calendar and meetings and stuff like that. Really cool. Thank you, Shirley. It's such a fun topic, and I think a lot of people will get so many great insights and tips on that. Next question, and a great segue. I know you mentioned, you touched on it earlier on like defining requirements, defining scope, and how important that is. I feel like you'll be a product manager's dream designer to work with, or even a founder? And I know you've worked with many founders. You mentioned you've been a product design freelancer, you worked in agencies, you've supported a lot of startups and founders. Would want to dive deeper on this topic, some of your experiences in this space, being a freelancer and supporting startups, and kind of what advice would you give for both sides, for founders or for agencies and designers as well, working with founders? And yeah, we'd love to hear more.
I'd say on the founder side, think that most founders don't need to hire a full-time designer off the bat, especially because if they're figuring out what their product looks and feels like, there are great resources like Tailwind to lean on. Where designers can come in is probably working in more of a freelance capacity, and they can kind of direct, like, how are you thinking about XYZ in terms of the architecture, interactions, the different types of touch points and whatnot. And I think that's where designers can come in and be great partners for founders. Not to say that there are no design founders out there. I think there are. It's just that I don't think hiring a designer full time should be the priority right off the cuff. And on the freelancing side, I would say always charge half up front and then half later. So you don't have to chase someone to send them an invoice, chase someone and to not get paid. Because I do think that there needs to be that trust built over time. And so I would tell every person that make sure that people are getting paid for their work, and at the very least, if you don't know them, get paid half up front first, almost like a deposit, and then get the rest later.
I love it. Try before you buy. No. Yeah, they're very cool. On this topic, what have you seen on a very successful kind of founder agency freelancer relationship? And what are some things you've seen, or tactics or strategies that kind of makes a great partnership?
Yeah. I think I've heard a lot more horror stories
Mm.
about founders working with agencies in the beginning. It happens more frequently with the agency X startup experience, is that a lot of work gets thrown away. And so I do think that there needs to be an understanding that, like, agencies are here to partner with you to help you get to where you might need to start at the finishing line or start at the starting line, but I don't think they necessarily expect all their work to be built out at a 99% capacity. And so I would say for founders, keep that in mind. Just be very, very cognizant of how you might be leveraging your resources and how you might want to work with an agency. And you usually can just get a sense of that by talking to and interviewing agencies first, understanding what type of products they've worked on, to what degree are they involved. And agencies come in all different types of capacities, from brand agencies to product agencies. They all have areas where they excel in. And so just be very mindful.
Yeah, definitely. It seems very subjective sometimes, picking freelance agency on what's great quality, ROI, and all that. I feel like this is such an important topic. Maybe one day you can write a blog on this topic, almost like a one-on-one, or I think that'll be very interesting for the world to read.
I would say knowing and defining the scope of work earlier on and being very, very granular and detail oriented around that on the product side is so important, because sometimes you might completely forget the intent of why you hired them in the first place, and you don't want that to happen, right? Because that's your money going down the drain. And so make sure you're getting what you need and be very explicit about that and hammer on that.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you, Shirley. Okay, this next one is one of my favorite topics, and I know we didn't plan on this.
Okay.
We're just gonna go with it. But the concept of craft, and there's been a lot of talk, I think, over the last year on just having kind of just amazing product craft and really having that gut feeling and intuition on what and just a great user experience is. How do you think, like, designers or even anyone, builders, learn craft and just build that, like, solid intuition on what, like, great looks like? And I think, like, so sometimes you can do custom interviews, you can get quantitative, qualitative feedback, which is important, but sometimes a quality designer, an amazing builder, just has intuition and craft on, like, really painting the picture of the future, which maybe sometimes customers and users do not even know is possible. Anything you can share on just kind of building that skill set?
Building that intuition of craft up, I is just exposing yourself to a bunch of different things, and that's why having an opinion or learning to have an opinion on things outside of what you think product design might look like is important. And when I say that, I mean having an opinion of your favorite business card, well, I'm just going to say it, your favorite business card paper texture, for
Yeah.
example, or even what you like and dislike about how you design your interior space,
Mm,
or even what you love about your t-shirt versus hate about another one. I think having opinions about and being able to differentiate what's good, what's quality, and what makes it mediocre is just so important. And over time, that helps you understand. I would love to actually include this in the experience of the product because I do think it makes the product end to end feel a little bit better. It's going to delight a person on the other end. And that I think that's what drives more intuition around craft and having a better intuition around
yeah.
craft.
Great. I totally agree. Putting yourself in situations to just learn and basically be a sponge. I truly do believe in that, and I think you're a true testament of that. Of like getting your hands literally hands on all aspects of different things, physical goods, digital experiences as well, and that's really cool to hear. It's an interesting topic it's hard to put into words sometimes. Like, how do you learn craft and intuition? Thank you for sharing your insights there, and I totally agree with that. Next topic, I know you're really passionate about kind of designing and building in the machine learning and AI space, and you have a bit of experience in in that space in your career. It's also a very hot topic right now. Do you have any tips or tricks or any considerations for a designer kind of designing and working in this space on things that they should think about? Any learnings in your time that you can share?
Yeah, I would say really understand how machine learning works. I'm not saying
Mm,
go become a machine learning engineer. I'm saying understand what it takes to train a model because the better understanding you have of it, the more effective you can operate as a designer to say, like, we don't have these things yet, but how do we get to XYZ so that we can have our model be able to do something like segment your fingerprint from your hand, for example. I don't know if we're able to do this today. It's a little creepy for me to even say it out loud, but like be able to lift your fingerprint from like a photo, for example, like understand what it takes to get there because just saying, oh, we're using ChatGPT and leveraging that as a whole without understanding the constraints of it, ultimately what might happen is that you might not get what you need out of it and you'll have to potentially find alternatives to the solution you're trying to figure out.
mm. Any tips for people that want to upskill in machine learning and AI? Any resources or how should they approach this?
Resources.
Or even is it literally building a tool themselves or yeah, any tips you think that will be great for designers?
Honestly, if you can get yourself in front of a machine learning engineer and understand what it takes, that's how I learned. I talked to a bunch of PhDs and told them, hey, I have no idea what you guys do. I'm on this team right now, and here's what I'm trying to learn and understand. How do we actually use this thing? What are we capable of today? And how do we get to where we want to be? To figure out like what concepts we want to push out. And I'm trying to be as vague as I can right now because that's how I picked up how to design for machine learning in the first place because I did a lot of tools internally.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you probably played and used a lot of tools as well and just kind of learnt a bit through that as well.
Yes and no. It's funny to see back then. It's funny to see now where we're at today. And when I did work on ML stuff, it was back in 2016. But even prior to that, it was just really understanding like, hey, you're basically plugging in data sets. What do you really want to know and what do you want to spit out?
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah. So crisp. I love it. You have great one-liners, I'm not going to lie.
Appreciate that.
Very cool, Shirley. Also, next topic, and a big congratulations to you and the Threads team. I want to dive deeper on this. I was reading the article on Threads on TechCrunch. It was really cool to hear about the journey, and I know the company just sold or to Shopify. Would love to hear more. I think you were the founding designer, the first hire. Not many designers can say that, and I think you were there for 4 years as well. I was also reading up on the fun topic of when Facebook and Meta launched Threads as well, and then the name debacle there, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, we'd love to hear anything you can share about your experience there. That'll be such an interesting topic for people to learn about.
Yeah, I'm going to say that for all the designers out there, because this is very important, is to work with an amazing manager. They don't have to be a design manager, they can be a product manager. I am so lucky that I got to work with Russo directly. He taught me how to be a PM of all PMs. And so it was a really fun time. We got to become really close friends over the years, and building and being able to push things out within 24 to 36 hours and ship it is wild and crazy and fun, and
Wow.
it's very addictive. At one point, I remember having a competition with my engineers and just saying like, "Hey, can I design and output quicker than our engineers can actually build?" And we had a checklist. In the very early days, we had a checklist of like, "Is this done yet? Is this checked off?" And so that was great. It was fun. It was so fun. Building Threads was an incredible experience. Initially, when I joined the company, they had a concept, they had amazing engineers, and I had a screenshot of what
Wow.
they wanted it to be.
Wow.
And it was a
Microsoft Paint?
screenshot.
Did you use Microsoft Paint?
I don't think it was Microsoft Paint. I think it was Photoshop or Sketch back then,
All right.
which was
Amazing.
hilarious. And
Yeah.
so it was great though. And we had a hypothesis that search was going to change the game for how people work. And so we built out our search functionality first and foremost and operated off of that.
Maybe we can backtrack. Actually, what is Threads for the listeners that may not know?
Well, when I was there, it was async communication for teams.
Right.
And I think right after I left, it became both a synchronous and asynchronous communication tool for enterprise companies.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. The pivot from maybe SMBs to enterprise, really cool. Any learnings of like, I'm sure there's a lot of communication tools around and they've been around for 20, 30 years or so. There's big players today, like Slack and Microsoft Teams, and any learnings you can share on building a kind of communication collaboration type of product.
Yeah. Two parts. I think Threads was right when it came to search being one of the ways that people would heavily integrate how they communicate in their workflow. The second part being everyone works very differently and they also consume very differently. By that, I mean some people are great at being able to absorb information and respond reactively. Some people aren't. I'm not one of those people. I'm one of those people who need to write everything out, see it, reread it twice, and then have a more informed opinion that I can give you after I get back to you, like maybe 30 minutes later. Because if I'm put on the spot, you're not going to get the response that you might want. And so everyone consumes inputs and outputs very differently when it comes to working and communicating together.
Yeah. No, I love it. Such a fun topic, and it's
It
really
is.
interesting to see how communication products evolve, over the last 20, 30 years, and the direction that's going to go in the next decade with kind of AI, machine learning, and maybe agents, talking to a robot or an AI, which is
Mhm.
also going to be fascinating over the next decade. Any other learnings you can share as being the first hire and founding designer? That's a very unique position to be in. I'd say maybe 1% of the global population or less has probably been in that shoe. I haven't met many other like first hires in a startup.
I would say don't trip yourself over branding right off the bat. I'd say it is important, but not as important as whether the product is working or not. And so build out the necessary components you might need to move forward and understand whether or not the actual workflow even makes sense, and then go from there. Branding itself is important in terms of I'd say maybe you're right about when you're trying to raise your Series A, but I would not say it's the thing that you should focus on from the beginning. You can have opinions and thoughts around it. You can put that into a folder and keep it for later when there's capacity and bandwidth for it. I know some people might chew me out for that, but that's
I
truly
love
what
it.
I think. Like you have only so much time to operate, and
Yeah.
there are other people who are probably trying to build something very similar. You're competing against those people as well as people who already have market fit. And so be very, very cautious about time. And so that's one. The other one I'd say is make sure everyone is aligned, figure out a way that works best for your team because not every team works very similarly. If it's just doing a quick asynchronous check-in on Slack, great, but just make sure everyone's aligned in direction and no one is blocked
Yeah.
because often I think designers block engineers without realizing it. And I think if Eng feels blocked, it's our job to figure out the right solution for them to continue moving.
And probably some designers feel like they're blocked by PMs or founders.
Well, I think that depends. If you know the intention of what let's say it's a product founder trying to, what he or she is trying to push out, then I think you can make some guesses or assumptions and go from there, but just make sure to tag them just to like, hey, confirm, like CC
Yeah.
XYZ, confirm
Yeah.
this, please,
So good.
or keep me honest. Yeah.
Great, great tips. Just to double click on this even more, and you mentioned time. I guess time and cash is the most important thing at an early stage startup on, let's say, a lifeblood ultimately. How do you think about shipping like a quality MVP to first customers versus building a full-blown solution that has all the bells and whistles in the world? What have you learned in this space of like, what's good enough? What's a good enough MVP to ship versus the other side of the spectrum?
Well, it totally depends too, right? Because you have to assume that this design partner or customer that you might acquire initially for your seed stage or Series A, that they might not grow with you in the way that they need to grow. And so I think being mindful of that's really important. Ideally, keep those stakeholders close and clued in with every step you make in terms of like that specific feature or workflow that they're looking for. Otherwise, they can feel dismissed. And I think that's very important to just also keep tabs on. Whose role this might be to do so? Say everyone's, but I think the people that usually try to put attention on it the most are the growth person or the.
Very cool. Well, congratulations again on Threads. It's an amazing story. First hire, first founding designer, sold to Shopify. What an incredible journey. And congrats to the Threads team. Next topic I want to talk about is your diverse skill set and various experience in so many different areas. I think you've done B2B, B2C, hardware, software, CPG, crypto, Web3, AI, cybersecurity, communications, dev tooling, CRM. You've touched literally every space possible in over a decade of experience. I think you're in such a unique position to answer this question, but how do you quickly learn a new space where you may not be an industry expert?
Yeah, you firstly learn from your peers, right? You watch a lot of videos that they feed you of just like, you should watch all these videos that are relevant to this space. The second piece is leaning on either your founders, your product managers, because they have the most context. So they're usually the most clued into the research that's been done, or they might be reading white papers they can share with you. Third piece is following social accounts that are relevant or related to them. So that's the quickest way to really understand the nitty gritty of like what that industry looks like.
Cool, very cool. Do you have a favorite space? You've kind of had such diverse experience. Is there any like one or two or three areas that you just very passionate about and love?
Yeah, I love anything machine learning because to me it's all about efficiencies and figuring out ways you can make someone's life, workflow, anything more effective, productive. And so that's how I see ML. But if I had to say a sector, I would say between communications and pet tech, because I spent the end of last year really diving deep into pet tech and communications because I worked almost 4 years at Threads. So got to really know problems people were facing, things that were intimidating, all the emotions and semantics that go into it.
Maybe you can do threads or Slack for pets one day. They'll be like perfect for you.
Like a collar that translate what they're thinking and
I don't
what they
know.
might need.
It sounds like it's possible in the future at this rate.
Maybe, maybe.
That's a good segue though to your pet tech experience. I think that's how we first met and bonded. Our mutual friend Daniel connected us because I think we both have a passion for entrepreneurship and starting something new. And I know you've doubled in a few times in doing your own startup, and I think your latest one was something called Luna around pet tech. Can you tell us more about that experience and what Luna was?
Yeah, so Luna was health tracking for dogs so that we can act as, so the technology can act as a preventative to help support their journey. And so I was actually trying, as many people would say, an Apple Watch for dogs, but really what I was trying to create was a collar attachment that was malleable for all different dog types that can detect their respiratory data as well as their sound data and movement. Because I have two dogs of my own, and one of them is actually a service animal. And so I was dreading the moment of thinking if I ever lost or if I was ever getting close to losing one of them. I don't know. It was that moment of just dread. And that's how I actually decided to work on Luna and contacted basically everyone.
Very cool. Very cool. Is this something you're still working on, or any learnings you could share on the next evolution of Luna?
Yeah, so that was my first time touching hardware and
Mm.
really understanding what sensor technologies exist out there. And unfortunately, we are very nascent with where we're at. A lot of the sensor technology today is really made for humans first and not animals as a whole first. So the problem there is that it doesn't account for fur, it doesn't account for breed, it doesn't account for like what species they might be. And the closest that I got to it was I found two scientists in London. I reached out to all these scientists that I emailed overseas and had a good amount of conversations with folks who were building sensors for cows, for horses, to see like if there was any way we can just bypass those issues. And the closest we got was a professor over in, I believe, London Imperial. And he was working on a dog harness that was able to capture heart rate data. They are still continue working on it, but the R&D for that would just be incredibly expensive because it does require new materials be made for those sensors. And the sensor itself can bypass the fur, and he can say more to it, but it's a very different way from how our PPG sensors work today. They're more accurate. This sensor works on humans, it works on animals, it works on mice, and it works on dogs. And they're testing it right now with service animals abroad. But that's the R&D is the reason why that I decided to take a pause on Luna and not continue for now because it would just be very costly and hard is hard. And a lot of investors are also very jaded by their hardware investments prior.
Incredible. I'm excited for the future of Luna. Who knows? In 5, 10 years' time, it could be up and running again. But I love the passion. I love the why behind it. It's so inspiring. I know we're coming at time and approaching the close. Maybe one final question before we get into the closing section. You have a cool project you're working on, right? A new launch coming up. Just adding to your million projects, like you have 1,000,001 project coming up. Could you share a bit more about that?
Yes, so it's called Democracy, and it's like if The Daily Show actually made a politically neutral, fill in the blank party game based on what's happening with politics today. And it's been really fun being able to work on it with friends and to get it out the door. Right now, we are working with printers to get it into production. And this morning, actually, I was in InDesign trying to set things up, but we're very excited for it. The actual website is up as well. Democracy with a Z. So,
Okay.
like democracy spelled Democrazy, the game.
Game.com. Amazing. Yeah, and got a sneak peek of the branding and it's incredible. I think for someone like myself, growing up in Australia and moving to the US 5, 6 years ago, it's a game I truly need to just upskill and learn a bit more about this topic. So thank you for creating it for people like myself. I do appreciate it.
Oh,
Okay, we'll get to the close. So, how I like to close my podcast is basically this concept of fast five. So, five very quick questions to get to learn a bit more about Shirley. First question, and I have to ask this as a PM: what's your favorite product and why? It can be physical, software, anything.
Aura, because it's the reason why I can actually function today. The Aura ring, because it tells me to get up. It tells me if I'm not exercising and I'm like missing my exercising days. And it really has a good sense of when I'm sick and when I'm not. And it's one of those things where I'm just always deep into doing things that I am really bad at tracking. It does it for me, in a sense.
I love this trend of fitness trackers and measuring health that you have a passion about. That's so beautiful. Very cool. Thank you, Shirley. Okay, next question. Obviously, with Tech to Table, one of our first products has been bringing people together over food. So if you could have dinner with anyone, who will it be and why?
Alive or not?
Anything, anyone.
My grandpa, he's passed away. He passed away in 2011, but it's been a long time. And he was the reason why I actually got into design. He was my one supporter in my family that actually believed that I could do it. And if I could, I would love to have breakfast dim sum with him again in China. No.
What would you get? Would you get silmai or what type of dumplings?
So I had a very specific order. Every morning back then when I was a kid, I would eat chow mein and it would be with soy sauce, very plain, and I would have porridge on the side.
Yum.
And also umai.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say it in English
Yeah,
way,
no,
so I'm just going to say it in the
the
Cantonese way.
Which is totally fine.
Yeah, but it's just nostalgic for me.
So beautiful, and I'm sure he's super proud of you today and all the amazing things you're doing. Next question, looking back at your journey, and you've kind of lived and have a ton of experience professionally and personally. If someone wants to follow Shirley's career pathway, what advice would you give them?
Oof. I would say don't. But also, I think the career advice I would give designers today is that your journey is unique to you. If you're trying to optimize for wealth, cool, focus on that, but just know that it gets old really fast and you're going to have a very mundane journey and you either are going to be okay with it or you're going to seek something else out. But everyone's journey is unique to them and aim for what you want to be and what you want to, like the life you kind of want to live down the line. So try to aim for that.
I love that. Yeah, I've realized that same thing as I've progressed in my career, just working on something that's very meaningful to me, it's purposeful, it's very, aligned to my personal mission as well. So I love that tip. Big +1 to that. Okay, looking into the future and, you did talk about like fingerprints and stuff like that, and things on hands, and I feel like you're a very innovative type of person. What are you most excited about in the tech industry or the product design space in the next decade or so?
I am actually excited for biotech and see how AI, computer vision, sound might really support those industries because it does have to do with longevity in a sense and people's health in a sense. But the better understanding we have of how we're doing the human body and be able to have a more accurate diagnoses that is maybe less invasive, I think the better it is. So I'm excited for that realm.
So cool. You've literally touched on all technology. I know you were deep on blockchain, Web3, AI.
I haven't done fintech.
Maybe that's a little hat tip to what's next. But yeah, last one. And I love this question because it really says a lot and tells a lot about someone. What's your kind of favorite quote or mantra you like to live by? And I love, you're great with one-liners, so, I'm very excited for this one.
God, maybe you might not be. Just get it done.
Just get it done.
Just get it done.
Very simple. Beautiful.
It's very simple. I think there's a lot of emotional hurdles we face when it comes to procrastination and whether we should or should not do it. You don't know until you just get it done. Just
do it. Very cool. Not sponsored by Nike at all. It's all from Shirley. Amazing, Shirley. I know we're at time now. Thank you so much for being a guest on Tech to Table Talks. I hope you had a lot of fun. I know the listeners are going to get a lot of incredible insights from such an amazing person. So thank you for being a big fan of and a big supporter of Tech to Table as well.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope this is helpful to your audience.
Thank you. All right. See you, everyone. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another serving of Tech to Table Talks. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you found the podcast valuable and entertaining, please support us by subscribing to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube channels. Please also give us a rating or leave a review to help us reach more listeners. Until next time, we'll see you in the next episode and also at a table near you.